Welcome to the Short Rod Show. You're talking with Ben.
And you got Brett.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. We got a very special episode today. I'm sure all of you are going to enjoy. What are we talking about, Brett?
This week, we got a hold of Tyler Stubbs. He is the Iowa DNR urban fisheries biologist. So
Cool.
I think that urban portion is kind of a unique deal, and he'll have some pretty interesting things to say about just fisheries within town. There's definitely some unique challenges that they run into versus, lakes and ponds that are out in the backwoods or, 5, 10, 20 miles out from civilization. He does a lot of interaction with people more than wildlife. So, yeah, he's got an interesting job.
Absolutely, and I think that interview was pretty awesome.
Yep.
I really enjoyed that.
So, yeah, this is pre-recorded.
Yep.
Coming up after the break here will be a pre-recorded deal we did a month ago with Tyler. Just gives us an opportunity during Christmas and all that. It's kind of difficult for us to get together and put together a podcast. So I think here after the break, I think you got a pretty good episode coming.
That'll be great. And if you guys are listening close, there's a lot of good gems in this interview. That you can't hear those anywhere else.
What happened
it's excited.
I hear a lot of other podcasts where they have people that they're interviewing, and it's just a question and answer thing, and I'm like, it's interesting. They have some interesting answers, but there's not really any back and forth. There's no conversation. Unfortunately, this one ended up being a question and answer kind of thing also, but that's just because Tyler kept firing out such gems. I didn't know where to interject. I didn't want to slow him down, or I just wanted him to keep on that thought that it just, yeah. And then as he was talking, I just kept racking my mind. I'm like, oh, what about this? What about that? What about that? It just, yeah.
You can tell Tyler's pretty passionate about what he does, and that's what makes it a really great interview. And we're really excited to bring this to you guys. We want to do more of this coming up.
Yep.
So I think it's pretty cool to have some different opinions and views on the podcast. And Tyler's a really great guy. Hopefully we'll get out on the water with him this year. And that's all coming up next on
The Short Rod Show. Hey, Ben, so I've got this buddy that's trying to start a small business, but he's having a real tough time with his digital footprint and just trying to figure all that out. Do you know anybody that could help him out?
Well, I think I do. I know a couple cool guys at this company called Evergrow Marketing, and they really specialize in helping landscape and lawn care companies maximize their digital footprint and basically bring customers to them, help them get found on the internet.
Really?
I mean, they'll work with any business. They're really looking to expand. And if you tell them that Ben and Brett sent you from the Short Rod Show, you can get 10% off your first order. Really cool.
If you're interested in the Evergrow Marketing team and what they have to offer, check them out on evergrowmarketing.com and tell them Ben and Brett from the Short Rod Show sent you.
You know, Brett, I was poking around on Facebook the other day, and I could just not find the Short Rod Show. What's the deal?
Oh, you just got to punch us in on Google.
What do you mean? We show up on Google already?
Oh, yeah. The Evergrow team hooked us up.
Holy cow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Good deal. I'll try that now.
Yeah, right. You just punch in Short Rod Show, and we'll come up on our website, shortrodshow.com. It'll come up on Podbean, Stitcher, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.
Awesome. So people can find us all over now.
Yeah, all over the internet.
That's great. We're also on Instagram, too. I've been trying to keep up with that. Posting some cool pictures. When we're out on the ice, you can check us out there, too.
Yeah, sweet updates.
Awesome. Check us out, guys. All right, guys. Here on the Short Rod Show, we have a very special guest we're speaking with today. His name is Tyler Stubbs. He's with the Iowa DNR, and he's a community fishing biologist. Did I say that right, Tyler?
Yeah, yep, said it perfect.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for joining us here. We're really, like I said, really excited to have you on. You just want to start by introducing yourself and just tell us a little bit about what you do with the Iowa DNR.
Yeah, no problem. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be on your podcast and to introduce myself to your followers and listeners. The community fishing program started in 2016, really with my hire. Essentially, it's a new program, which is something, from a DNR standpoint, new programs are not something we had really invested in and done. And the whole thing is to work with cities on providing good quality fishing opportunities. We realized back in, I want to say 2012, somewhere in there, that our fishing license holders had actually kind of swapped from the majority of them being, rural Iowans and the minority being urban Iowans. And that kind of swapped, and the majority of our license holders actually live within some of our larger cities and suburbs now. And so realizing that we hadn't spent a ton of time on focusing on fishing resources near where the majority of our people live, we took that opportunity to start doing that. So it's been a good program. I think the amount of ponds being built in the last few years is really crazy. I think we've got 23 new ones coming on that will be ready to stock.
We like hearing that.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's been averaging in the teens each year. And there's been a few more. The majority of them are usually in the Des Moines area, but we've got some renovations going on in Davenport and Asbury up by Dubuque, Fort Dodge. So there's a variety of places across the state where we're helping cities out with figuring out how to build some of these to provide a sustainable fishery.
Sweet. Yeah. So Tyler, you mentioned that they started this program with your hire. I guess kind of what led you down the career path of community fisheries biologist, or kind of where are you from and that sort of deal?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm originally from Gowrie, Iowa, which is it's just south of Fort Dodge.
Yep.
And as far as education-wise, I went to school at Iowa Central Community College, and then finished up my bachelor's at South Dakota State in wildlife fisheries, and then went down to Mississippi State for my master's.
Ooh, nice.
And so between those times, had a few internships with South Dakota Game Fish and Parks and the Iowa DNR, the Webster County Conservation Board, and finished up my master's at Mississippi State, and ended up staying there as a district biologist in Northeast Mississippi out of Tupelo, the birthplace of Elvis Presley. You may have heard of it. But
that's cool.
I was there a little over 5 years before making the move back up here to Iowa. And it's really interesting in that I think when I was doing my bachelor's, I don't know if urban fishing programs that really just wasn't a thing. There's a few cities like St. Louis, Chicago, Kansas City. They had urban programs, Houston, Dallas, but it really wasn't something that, Iowa having an urban program, that was not really on my radar at all, that this would be the career path I'd go down. And so being just the general fisheries biologist in Mississippi, where I had a district of 16 counties and various water bodies, to coming up here and working mainly with people, which is what I really like to do, has been quite a change. And so the urban arena or community arena, we kind of changed the word to community a couple of years ago, just because urban doesn't really resonate with a lot of the folks we work with.
Yeah.
It might work in Des Moines, but you start getting out to Ankeny, Grimes, Bondurant, they don't consider themselves, quote unquote urban. And so we had changed the name to community. And it's been awesome. I like working with a lot of people. I like the communication aspect. I like the trying to get other people on board to promote fishing. And the interesting thing is, I brought up some of those projects that are going on where all these ponds are being built. The Iowa DNR, we're not going to be purchasing property in downtown Ankeny or downtown Des Moines, or any of these suburbs, in residential areas. That's not something we're going to do. And we haven't built new lakes in a long time. But the cities are doing that. They've got ponds right where people live, which is exactly what we wanted. And we're just helping them with that process to make, they're built for stormwater first and foremost, but we can piggyback off that and make it a recreational amenity.
Is there some criteria that they got to meet as a stormwater collection pond? Because there's a ton of them being built, but not necessarily all of them probably falling within your program, are they?
No. So there's a couple things that are the biggest sticklers. They've got to be public, or the public has to have the ability to access them. So most of the time, it's got to be publicly owned or city owned. The other thing is we don't typically do much with anything less than about half an acre. We just can't really sustain a population of fish very well in some of these urban areas with a size less than that. As far as, we've got some guidelines on how we would like to see some of these built, but ultimately it's not up to us. It's up to the city, and that's been part of the job too, is promoting, hey, if you added a few more feet here or changed the slope to this, you would potentially have a much better stormwater basin for fishing. And so that's what a lot of it has been. But if it's public and we can provide a good sustainable fish population in it, it's a go. So fisheries management really is a twofold definition. And so there's provide the opportunity to fish, which is what the cities are doing, and the counties to some extent, based, depending on where they have locations. Polk County Conservation, for instance, has multiple areas here in the metro. And then we come in and provide the opportunity to catch fish by partnering them with to provide the actual fish itself. So it's a good partnership. It's a good bond. Having a partnership between the cities all across the state and the DNR fisheries is not something we've had before, and that's something we're trying to continue to grow.
Yep. So you mentioned they got to be public. As just somebody, just being a resident of town, how do you identify which ones are public and which ones can I, access and fish?
Yeah, so we've done the work for you all across the state. We're still working on it, but in the majority of the areas, we've done the work for you. On the Iowa DNR website, there's the Fish Local page. So it's www.iowadnr.gov/fishlocal. And on there's a Google map with ponds on it that we know have a fish population, that we know are publicly owned. Since it's a Google map, you can click on it, get directions to it on your mobile device.
Yeah, that is the most handiest thing.
That was a big deal. We'd never, most of our maps are all through a GIS type of server, fishing atlas and hunting atlas. So this is the first one that was Google based. I'm in the process of adding in some more as we work with more communities. I've added in, what fish species we know are there. I'm going through checking to make sure I've got the ice fishing correct. As some cities don't allow ice fishing, some do.
So you led right into my next question: was why is
Brett
that?
was all pumped up about that because that's been kind of crazy.
There's a pile of them over in Altoona, and it annoys me that it says directly right on there, no ice fishing.
Yeah. So those are our city code, and it took me by surprise too. I was unaware, and how that kind of came about is I had a group of anglers contact me and say, "Hey, it'd be really nice if you could put on this map where I can and can't ice fish." And I wasn't aware that you couldn't. And so I started reaching out to some of the cities and realized that there was some city code in place that prohibited ice fishing. A lot of it's a liability risk or the liability risk. And we've been able to, working with the cities and getting that relationship going. Cities of Waukee, cities of Norwalk have now started allowing ice fishing on their pond. You've got Ankeny and Bondurant. Johnston was a new one as well. You can do City Des Moines everywhere except for Grays Lake. So there's plenty of opportunities for ice fishing here in the metro. But something we're still trying to work on. I'm still reaching out to cities on getting their.
Well, that's good because from our perspective, that's our bread and butter is ice fishing. But just having that opportunity to get out on a local pond in your city, whether that's in Ankeny, Altoona, Bondurant, wherever, if guys are listening in, this would be the time to reach out to those cities and say, hey, this is important to us, like Altoona, for instance. Why do we have this code? Let's maybe look at changing that. Here's all these other cities that have done it successfully, and we want to be more like them and get some more fishing opportunities. So maybe our listeners can help open up a few more ponds to that.
That'd be sweet. Some
ice fishing action. So that's cool.
Yeah. Ice fishing's it's a winter opportunity that we can market, the cities can market, as something that you can do within the city limit there. So it's just like I said, a lot of it's older city code that has been there a long time, and some of it some of it Like in Waukees instance, they didn't have anything written because they didn't have any ponds up until a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so it provided the opportunity there to get ice fishing allowed. So it's something we're working with the communities on to at least get a straight yes or no on it, and hopefully keep people out of trouble.
Cool. Yeah, definitely. And that's really what we preach to is ice safety and kind of knowing what you're doing. And if you don't know what you're doing, hopefully they're listening to our podcast a little bit.
Usually what I do is I'll just go there and wait for somebody to yell at me anyways.
Yep.
That's how I identify which ponds to go to is can I get there through a bike path? And if I can, I'll go on it regardless until someone tells me to not be on it.
Some of the things out Tuna does a good job on most of theirs, from what I remember of having some signage. Some of the other cities have some signage on there too to at least let you know, which is nice.
Yep. That's good. Yeah, so if you guys like what Tyler was saying on the Fish Local page, it's really cool. I mean, this is something that I don't know if a lot of people realize the resource we have in the Iowa DNR and how great a job they do in highlighting places to fish, making it easier for people to get out and fish. You know, just having this map you can click on and showing all the urban ponds you can fish is pretty amazing.
And not only, having the places to fish, but there's seriously some quality fish to be caught out there. Like
there is.
I mean, you can go catch. I'd be disappointed most of the time if I don't catch at least a 4-pound bass while I'm out there fishing. Or, I mean, I know there's a handful of ponds here in Ankeny that I can get a 9-inch bluegill. So I mean, some seriously impressive opportunity out there. Speaking of fish, though, a little bit, how do you guys determine what mix of fish that you're going to put into a pond? Because I know there's some ponds that get, like your standard bass, bluegill, catfish, but then there's also another one. And then if you could go into a little bit of why you guys do the perch bass combination, because I think that's interesting and I like that combination a lot. It provides a lot of fun fishing. If you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I don't want to give away all my perch secret spots, but
we don't have to talk spots.
Yeah, we don't have to talk about spots.
They're out there.
I guess since you asked, I'll mention it. But no, the bass bluegill catfish thing, that's something that's been kind of the tried and true combination, developed in the South in the 40s at Auburn University as being the simplest and the best combination for small ponds to provide essentially the goal is to provide a balanced fish population. And so it's also about the easiest thing to manage. You've got your predator, you've got your prey base, and then the catfish is in there as kind of a mix and a bonus species. And so that's the easiest thing for us to do. It's they're easy fish to identify by anglers. So one of the biggest things in these the suburbs and the urban areas is a lot of our anglers are novice. The bulk of our fishing license sales even are folks that don't buy a license every year. And we've got a lot of beginners. And so they're easy fish to identify. They're easy fish to catch. And so it's just a good combination for us.
Well, so how do all these crappies get in there?
I did listen to your podcast on that. I'm not sure how they all get in there, but they're definitely something we struggle with. It's a problem species for us, and as you know, fishing in Ankeny, there's a few ponds that, good luck seeing a crappie over 6 inches.
Yep.
And it's going to be paper thin.
Yeah.
And those crappies are just so sporadic on how they reproduce, and so we may have a few years there where they don't reproduce very well. The fish are big, the population is doing well, a lot of 10, 11-inch fish. And then we'll have a few years in a row, for whatever reason, that they have very successful reproduction. A lot of fish recruit to the population over and over again. And we get stuck with the population that, quite frankly, is pretty poor.
Yep.
And the one thing crappie like to eat are bass. And so they crop off the bass population. And then the crappie don't get big enough to control the bluegills. And so it's just a domino effect. And we end up with a population full of stunted fish with a few giant bass swimming around.
Yeah.
And it's just not something that the anglers are going to take advantage of. And so the crappies do provide us quite a bit of issues. One thing we are learning at first when we started seeing all these crappies show up, we were pretty discouraged, just wondering what was going to happen. What we've kind of seen happen in a few of these ponds is about every 5 years, 3 to 5 years, we have a huge die-off, and the majority of that crappie population dies.
Really?
Whether it's some sort of disease or parasite or whatever it is, they're all the same size, so it affects them all. And then the pond kind of starts over a little bit. So it's not near as doom and gloom as we once thought it would be, but it still is a huge problem for us. That and goldfish. We see a lot of goldfish.
Oh, yeah.
Stocked. So those are.
I've picked up a few pike. I know a few folks have caught a few walleye out of a couple ponds also.
Yeah, we've got a couple ponds in particular on the northwest side of town that we've seen some nice walleyes in. Smallmouth bass, and then yellow perch you brought up. So the yellow perch kind of came about as it's a species we see continually show up. We get questions about it, myself and Ben Dodd. He's the district biologist over the metro out of Boone. We continually get questions about where can you catch perch near the metro. And it continually shows up as perch ranking high in a lot of our surveys of fish that people want to catch. And, we've got a good relationship with the city of Ankeny. They've got 34 ponds, I believe, in town. And so we thought, why don't we try something a little different and see if we can figure out this perch thing? Because a lot of people say you can't do it. And so we worked with a graduate student at Iowa State, and that was his focus. And so we tested out, I think we had 4 or 5 maybe ponds here around the metro, a couple in Ankeny. And we stocked them with various rates of perch, various amounts of perch, and then a variable stocking rate of largemouth bass at various stocking sizes. And I can get into that in a minute.
So you're saying this is still, I guess, kind of more in the experimental phase, sort of. It's not a...
Yeah.
Okay.
It's definitely experimental.
Cool.
So far, it hasn't worked all that well. The bass population really has taken over in most of them. We saw huge recruitment. And the perch, the other thing we've learned is all those fish, all the perch were tagged. And so we learned a couple things about those perch. Most of the time, the tags had rewards. A lot of them did. So that influenced people to call in the tag and report it. And we learned a couple things. One is those perch do not provide a whole lot of summer fishing opportunity. The vast majority of those tags were reported during the winter. And so, as a angler recruitment tool, it didn't do us a whole lot of good, or it hasn't done us a whole lot of good if they're not a fish you can catch during the open water very easily. So it's not a really good angler recruitment tool wise. The other thing is those perch seem to like to move around. And we've had numerous perch that we had stocked in some ponds end up in other ponds. Storm sewer system. And so got kind of
really
interesting. I didn't know that was.
I just assumed people were catching them and throwing them in other ponds. Is what I assumed.
So they can kind of be connected in some way.
Yeah, and so that's why I struggle with saying that. There's illegal stockings in this pond and this pond and this pond of crappies, for instance, because there's probably a pretty good chance that during high water events, some of those fish are transferred through the sewer system into a different pond. And so that's probably more likely than somebody, being Johnny Appleseed with fish, dumping crappies here and there. It's probably more likely they're actually transferring themselves.
Yeah.
And so the perch, we're still learning. We're trying a few other ponds based on some new research out of Nebraska, where they stocked yellow perch only, and they stocked them multiple times over a multiple year period. So just kind of continued to stockpile that population until they were able to get established, and then start adding in a predator. So that's kind of the next route we're going to try, and see if that takes off. We did, it was nice to see the perch did reproduce and they were successful, but our bass populations were just a little too high.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I was going to say, any of the perch I've ever caught, I don't remember ever seeing a tag.
No. Nope.
Is it like a dorsal tag? Is that what you're talking?
Yeah, so they've got what's called a Floyd tag, so it'd be a bright yellow tag off the dorsal of the fish.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, the perch program, that is something that a lot of people are interested in, but like you said, if it's not great summer fishing opportunities,
Yeah.
that's just better for us then.
Yep.
We'll just get out there on the ice to catch them.
Yeah, and there's some thermal concerns for water temperature. What a lot of people don't understand is these urban ponds fluctuate a lot temperature-wise. If we get a good summer rain, that water's coming in pretty hot. It's coming in off of hot concrete, off of hot shingles, and it's making that water really warm. And that kind of puts those ponds on the edge of being something the perch would thrive in anyway. But we picked out some specific locations away from major roads where we maybe weren't getting that type of effect.
Interesting.
Well, that's cool. That's really cool, Tyler. Really when we think about what makes a lake, good to fish, a pond really good to fish, it's good to have a balance of something that's way out in the boonies, like somebody's farm pond that you have to know somebody to go fish at, and something that's right across the street. I used to live on the other end of town. We had a pond right down the road. It was just really slick to be able to slip over after work or on the way home and go fish at it.
Or after the kid goes to bed.
Absolutely. Now, family man, we gotta sneak in fishing whenever we can.
Right.
Between this podcast also.
Yeah, exactly. The podcast keeping us busy and everything. So you know how that goes, I'm sure.
I definitely understand that. One thing I wanted to mention too was that's been kind of interesting with this position is learning about people and what they want. And so, for avid folks like you and I, we may choose the place that's out in the boonies where we know we may not catch a ton of fish, but we've got a good opportunity to catch maybe some bigger fish.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what the typical angler really wants in these areas. They want really their goal is to catch a fish or have somebody in their group catch a fish, and the amenities like bathrooms and picnic tables and stuff like that, more family-friendly amenities, is really what a lot of folks are looking for. That is coupled with the opportunity to fish.
Yeah.
And so that's been also something else to learn, that some of these ponds we don't necessarily need to really hardcore manage. We just need to be able to provide that opportunity for people to stop by after work, blow off some steam from the workday, throw a few casts, catch a few bass, and go home. Is really what a lot of these ponds are used for.
Yeah, and definitely we see that in the winter and the summertime too, just driving by around town, more so I guess in the summer. I noticed it, but now recently within the past few years, the ice fishing's really picked up to where you see a lot more tents out on the ice, on a Sunday afternoon or even a weekday night.
Right.
If you see a big blue otter, that's probably me and Brett out trying to catch a few, recording an episode, but it's really become a lot more popular too. I think ice fishing as a whole. As a sport within the last few years. So that's good that you guys are keeping up, and looking out for that and trying to fulfill everybody's needs. I mean, you're not going to please everybody, but, really we're, like you said, we're kind of hardcore anglers, but on a weeknight, we want to get out and just catch some fish.
Oh, yeah.
We're not out for trophies or we're not, taking fish home necessarily either. We're just out to have a good time. So I think a lot of people share that mentality.
Pick up some Casey's pizza and have at it for a couple hours.
Yep.
Yeah, there you go.
So you mentioned, of course, we all know the DNR's program here, the Fish Local program is excellent, does a really good job of getting people out in their local communities to catch fish. But what would be your advice to someone who lives in an area, that maybe doesn't have a good urban fishing program? What could they do to get involved? How would they go about getting involved, I guess, to make it better? Because our scope here at the Short Rod Show, we talk a lot about Central Iowa topics, but we're talking to people from every ice
we get a lot of
fishing
folks
state.
in the Northeast for some reason.
Yep, and it's very interesting to hear about kind of their struggles and their topics of what interests them. So how would they be able to get involved? What could they do to work on a program like what you mentioned with Iowa?
Yeah, it's I'll start at a city level, for instance. If you live in a city that has a pond that you think would make a good fishery, reach out to your local biologist, or if your state has an urban biologist of some sort. And there's something to be said about having kind of that local champion. That's how a lot of things get started. That's how it gets put on a lot of priority lists. That's how it makes the city council agendas, is you start to have, that local champion that can promote and show that, there's some value in having that resource. A lot of people want to be able to provide all kinds of opportunities recreation wise. And, to me, you can provide softball and baseball and soccer and all that. But there's a nature side to that too, with fishing that ranks up there just as high and probably just as passionate for the most part.
Oh yeah,
yeah, more
ice fishermen are rabid. I've come to find out.
We're crazy.
Having that local champion, being able to reach out and put it on your state agency's list. Try to see what the fish population looks like. We've had some people, work up cleanup days and stuff like that around city ponds that, gain some local attention, and people realized, oh man, there's a pond out here. Why am I driving clear over here? I didn't even know this place existed. So some of it's just getting the word out and promote it that, hey, this is a publicly owned opportunity. Why aren't we utilizing it a little more?
Cool. Yeah, that's excellent. Like I said, we hear from a lot of listeners that are interested in, and I'm sure getting some better fishing opportunities. And
Yep.
that was on my mind today, thinking, okay, we have such a great program here in Iowa. How could someone duplicate that in maybe a community or a state that doesn't care as much about it?
And it's a little bit interesting as an angler, is at least for these community fishing lakes, is I'm not as protective of my fishing spot in these ones. Like if I was out on Big Creek or went to Brushy, I would just tell you maybe I went to that lake, but that'd be about as close as I'm going to tell you I was at. Where here I'm just like, yep, we were fishing, over on 18th Street. Have at it. It's just a half-acre pond. How many spots could there be?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know. In my mind, I'm not quite as protective of those spots.
Cool. All right. Do you have time for a couple other quick questions, Tyler? I know we're trying to hold her to a good time limit here, but we're just spouting off here. I got some good ones for you.
Like I said in that email, you're going to have to cut me off. I like it.
We talk fishing all night with you. I love it. So, you see a lot of different. You said you enjoy working with people. You enjoy kind of seeing what people want as part of their fishing experience. But what's one thing that you'd like our listeners to work towards being better at when it comes to ice fishing? Some kind of habit, something that'll help ensure that the sport and the fishing habitats are successful. Really, Brett and I have had a couple episodes, comments on people's behavior out on the ice, either positive or negative. But what's something that we could all work at to be better at to help our fisheries?
Yeah, that was a good question. There's really two things that came to mind. One is continue to take somebody out that hasn't gone out before. There is a ton of people that are avid fishermen that have never been ice fishing.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people think it's too expensive. You need way too much equipment, which, you can show them that you really don't. You can do it with an auger and a bucket if you really want to, and a schoolie.
Absolutely.
I knew one of you guys was a schoolie fan.
Oh yeah.
And I own 3 or 4 of those myself. But there's ways that you can do it on the cheap side, but continue to take new people out and show them, hey, these opportunities exist. Fishing is one of those things that exists 12 months out of the year, and there aren't too many things that can say that you can do outside recreationally, outside of biking and running. Mm-hmm. You've got fishing right up in there. You can do that 12 months out of the year. Some of the worst weather has provided some of the best fishing for me, to be honest. And so you get out there, take new people out. The other thing is really a concern to me in some of these ponds is to pick up after yourself. A lot of these ponds are literally in people's backyards. And, I just get really discouraged when I show up and there's pop cans and, trash or even fish laying on the ice.
Yep.
That's something that people are looking out their window and looking at. And that's not really going to make them be super positive when it comes to, future people coming in to fish. They're going to get fairly protective of that. And rightfully so. It's in it's in their backyard. And they don't want to be looking out at that. And it gives people, gives ice fishermen a bad name.
Oh yeah.
Fishermen in general.
Yep.
And so those are probably the two biggest things: is take somebody new out and make sure you're whatever you take in there, you take out with you. And a lot of these places have trash cans available. If you don't, every Casey's store has got a trash can outside. It's easy to get rid of. Just take the stuff out with you. As far as the fish go, if you're not going to keep it, throw it back. There's no reason to leave a bunch of fish laying on the ice. It's a lot of times it's well-intentioned. I bring up crappie. One of the last times I went ice fishing, there was a pile of crappies 6-7 inches long laying on the ice. And it's well-intentioned because people think, that they're helping that population out by thinning it out. But in reality, there's thousands of those in there.
You're not even making a dent.
Yep.
Yeah. And putting it back in there didn't do any better or worse than keeping them out. So if you're not going to keep it, put it back in and just pick up after yourself and be respectful of not only nature and the resource, but also the people that live around there.
Yep.
Yeah, that's excellent. Excellent tips for all of our listeners. That's really what we preach here too is packing out what you packed in and then some.
Yep.
It's super disappointing getting out to a spot and just seeing it littered full of junk.
Especially when you see stuff in the holes. Because I could believe, a few things maybe they blow out there, but somebody threw some crap in the hole.
And then once it's frozen in the ice, you can't get it out. It's gonna either thaw and someone will pick it up, hopefully, or it's going to the bottom of the pond.
Yep.
Yep. One more question for you, Tyler.
All right.
What's something that's interesting or unique that you've learned from being a fishing biologist that you'd like to educate others on? I'd like to think that you have a much different perspective on things being a biologist than, the average Joe ice fisherman. But I'm interested to see what that might be. What's something that you've learned throughout your years of experience?
Well, thinking of where I'm at now in the working within the city limits and working with cities is probably one of the biggest things I've learned is just how connected everything is. And so, especially from an ecosystem side, for instance, if there's a pond down your street that has a bunch of vegetation in it, it's got a bunch of algae, it looks terrible, it doesn't look like it's got good water quality. And, then you go home and fertilize your yard 10 times every time after it rains, and all that washes into your pond, the pond that you're complaining about. A lot of people do not understand that connection that, what you put on your lawn, what you put on your sidewalks, what you do in your own yard has a direct effect on some of these ponds.
Oh, yeah.
That you may be complaining about, and so that's probably the biggest thing we're trying to I'm trying to work with folks on is this pond won't potentially will not look like this if you went to a phosphorus-free fertilizer on your yard, you picked up your dog waste, you didn't pour a bunch of sand in your driveway every time it snows. All that stuff's going to end up right in that pond down the street. And it's kind of hard to get people to realize that. These are, as we mentioned at the beginning, these are our fisheries. That's what we've, luckily been able to make them to be. But what they are stormwater basins. They're stormwater retention, and they're doing their job. Their job is to collect that. A lot of cities, especially here around the metro, have grant programs that you can use for stormwater things at your home, rain barrels and rain gardens, stuff like that to help pay for those things. And those things are going to have an effect on that little pond down the street. And it's a little easier to get that information across when you're talking about the pond down the street. If you're talking about Saylorville or, a huge reservoir, it's kind of hard to understand that and get that connection. But when you're talking about that little pond down the street, a few people doing some of those things on the landscape can really have a sizable impact pretty quickly. It's actually pretty impressive. And so that's probably the biggest thing from a connection standpoint. We want to promote good water quality, and that's how we can do it is taking care of our lawns around there. The other thing is, and I hear this from cities sometimes, is, that tall grass that is right around the pond, all around the pond, it's there for a reason.
Yep.
It's not to be mowed. You may think it looks like weeds or it's unsightly. It's actually there for two reasons. One is that tall grass helps slow the water down. It helps prevent shoreline erosion. It helps keep those nutrients out of the pond. Hopefully they fall off and dissipate, in that grass. It provides some wildlife habitat. But what it also does is a goose deterrent. And so a lot of that, geese don't like to be in places they can't see over. And that's one way to try to combat some of these big goose problems that we have here in the metro, especially, is this tall grass prairie that wraps around each pond, is to be there to kind of deter them from feeling comfortable using that place.
Man, there's a hot tip for you right there. Holy cow.
Yeah, that's cool. I never knew that.
Yeah, a lot of, I know cities take a lot of heat for some of that stuff, and there's definitely a method to the madness there. When you start pairing up really big rocks, really big riprap on the shoreline and tall grass, that's there to try to keep geese off the pond and out of your yard, really. So there's a reason for it. Those would probably be the biggest things, I guess, for public education wise ponds.
Well, I know Ben said that was going to be your last question, but I don't want to let you go here yet before we talk about, at least ask you about the community trout stocking stuff. Because I think that's a cool opportunity that definitely not everyone has an opportunity to fish for trout very often. And frankly, the only time I've ever caught a trout is through that program anyways. You just comment a little bit about it anyways.
Yeah, so the community trout program, it's, it predates me by a long ways. I want to say we're up to 18 ponds around the state.
Oh, wow.
And that's kind of at our capacity. I get a lot of phone calls, can we do a trout stocking here? Can we do one here? And we're really, quite honestly, just at capacity. It takes, somewhere in that neighborhood of 15 to 18 months to grow those fish.
Oh, yeah.
They're all catchable size. So the bigger the fish, the more storage they take up at the hatcheries. And so we're kind of at capacity where we're at. So as far as adding new places in, that's not something I foresee anytime soon.
Yep.
But locations we do have, like you said, I've made a couple trips to Northeast Iowa, but my first trout came out of one of these trout stockings. Caught some last week here in Bondurant.
Oh, yeah.
And, we've got Bondurant and Johnston, and here in the metro, Ames, Indianola would be the other two here in central Iowa. We have done a little bit of rotating in the eastern side of the state, just because Lake of the Hills in Davenport is down for renovation. And so we've kind of bounced that stocking around a few new locations.
Yeah, I saw you moved it into Mar Park this year, which I'm from down in that area, so I was kind of pumped to see that. Yeah,
we got Mar Park. I think last spring we did, I think it was in Emma Young Pond in Clinton. I can't remember where it's going to go. It's Emma Young Pond in Clinton, and last spring it was in Fairfield. And that's in Mar Park right now, outside of Ainsworth, Washington area. I can't remember where it goes next, but we've kind of bounced that around, waiting for Lake of the Hills to come back, and that may be a strategy we use in the future. I don't know. But the trout, it's really, I think it's really cool. I get excited about it when it's trout stocking time, because that's something that, I'm not going to normally catch around here. It's something they fight like crazy. I try to go as light a tackle as possible, because I think they just fight so hard. And I just like catching them. Anything shiny, this time they've been in the water for a couple weeks now, so they're going to be not surfacing as much. So it's not going to be sight fishing, but using night crawlers and stuff like that on the bottom is.
Yeah, you definitely know when you got one on. That's for sure.
Yeah, there's no shortage of that. And I hope people utilize it. And I see a lot of people out, after we stock. It's really interesting because I fish Lake Patoka a lot, and here in Bondurant. And most of the year it's not too crowded. by any
Yeah.
means. There's some people that fish it, but after those trout get in there, people show up from all over, Jasper County, Story County, Warren County, you name it. It's bringing people into the area, and people are willing to travel for it, and it provides a really cool opportunity to catch a fish that tastes good too.
Oh yeah.
It also helps.
Well, cool. Yeah. I think that's about all we had for you, Tyler. Unless you had a few wrap up comments, I think we're going to call her a day.
No, I just appreciate the time and go out, catch some fish, use that Fish Local map. Like I said, we've done the work for you. You don't need to worry, well, is this a homeowner association, or, who owns this, or can I fish here? If it's on that map, you can fish it.
Yep.
We've worked with the owner of it. And if you see something on there that's incorrect, please email me, because that's the last thing we want to do is have something incorrect on there. But I'll continue to update that map as new ponds come on. And I'm starting to get in there, updating the ice fishing stuff, as well as, I mentioned some of the amenities earlier, is putting in there what kind of amenities are available. One last thing, because I got a question on it today, was there's a pond, there's some ponds that are public that are not on there. And most of them are new. And the reason that is because that fish population is most likely not established yet. So I want to make sure you have a good chance to actually catch something before you go out there. And so we usually wait till we've stocked it in the spring. We'll go back next spring, kind of verify that the stocking held, fish are doing well before we post it on there. And so there may be some of them that, well, I know the city owns this. If it's brand new, that's what the holdup is. We're just making sure that fish population's in there. Yeah,
making sure, there's something to catch there. And I was going to comment, if you're a little bit more of a tech savvy, I do believe you have a GPX file also that you can download, or maybe a KML file that you can download and just have it directly on your phone also. Not have to go to the DNR website to get your locations. But I think
you can choose to have that pop up on your Google Maps on your phone. It's a selection. You say, whenever I open Google Maps, this map comes up as well. And so that's another way you can have it readily available all the time.
Sweet. Well, I appreciate you coming on, Tyler, and it was good chatting with you. But thanks for tuning in to the
Short Rod Show.